So I'm coming to you here with the Wealth Insights, and I've just spent the best part of 5 days with Dr. Dolf de Roos. And we spent 3 days in Phoenix and 2 days in Atlanta. Dolf, I've known you for a long time. I read your book, Real Estate Riches, when I was 19 years old. It's a New York Times bestseller. You've worked with Robert Kiyosaki, Donald Trump, so many of them, Brian Tracy, you're a professor of real estate, you're endorsed by the National Association of Realtors. But I think one of the things that excites me most about you is that a lot of people have talked about investing in international real estate recently, but you've been talking about it for 20, 30 years. You speak 6 different languages, you live and have lived around the world, and you've also invested around the world. And for me, this Wealth Insight, you spoke about it yesterday. You're launching the whole discussions with Dolf in the inner circle that people can get hold of us if they want more information. But what we're trying to do with these Wealth Insights is, what is the difference between the 99% that can't, do what they want and ultimately they retire poor, and the 1% that do retire wealthy? And what is the insight that is the difference between the rich and the poor in your perspective?
Oh gosh, that's so difficult to summarize in a short space of time. I spent 9 months once trying to find out what is it that the rich have in common. I thought if I can identify perhaps 30 or 40 things that the rich did differently, and if I could then emulate those things, then I'd have a good chance at being rich, basically. And yet I could hardly find anything that the rich had in common. It wasn't age, it wasn't gender, it wasn't religious belief, it wasn't whether you were born into a rich family or not, it wasn't whether you're an immigrant family or not, and it certainly had nothing to do with education. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that there's almost a negative correlation between education and wealth. Now, that's no reason to drop out of school or drop out of a tertiary institution at all, but when you think about it, the richest person on this planet for many years is Bill Gates, and yet he's a dropout from Harvard. And Larry Ellison, the CEO of Oracle Computers, second richest person on this planet by many measures, college dropout. Paul Allen, the 2 I see at Microsoft, college dropout. There's a pattern there. And the reason is quite obvious. If you're a tenured professor earning $120,000 a year, that's pretty good. I mean, in many people's estimation, that makes you rich. But you'll never earn $120 million that year. To do that, you can't have a job. So at the end of my 9-month study, Scott, I only found 2 things that the rich had in common. One is that almost without exception, the rich had integrity. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you need to have integrity to get rich. There are many members of the mafia or other organizations like that who become fabulously wealthy without what most people would call integrity. However, they don't normally stay rich. They say that the average age of death of people in the mafia is a lot lower than people not in the mafia. In other words, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Anyway, when I was 17 and I made this study, I didn't give much credence to integrity. Although it's one of the most important factors, Scott, if there's nothing else I've learned, is that it's that integrity is not genetic, which means if you're not happy with your current level of integrity, you can change it in a heartbeat. And my contention is that to the extent that you do, you'll have more money coming your way. But the only other thing, Scott, that I found in common...
Just before you get into that other thing,
yes.
I have to say, having had the privilege of dealing with a number of billionaires, the guys that are happiest are the ones that have the integrity as well. So they not just have the money, but also just the happiness part. So anyway, sorry, I'll
Scott, we do a whole 1-day event on integrity and explaining why it's so important. And it's not just that you sleep better, that's almost like a platitude, but you actually do sleep better. And Scott, the only other thing that I could find that the rich had in common is that the rich either made their money or held their wealth in real estate. And when I was 17 and came to this conclusion, I thought, well, if that's all it is, if it's not these 30 or 40 things that you have to do simultaneously, if that's all it is, I can do that, I can try that. And so I tried it without even knowing what the outcome would be. And I went ahead and bought my first property. It was a wooden villa divided into 2 flats. And I bought another one, and by the time I finished 8 years at university, I got a PhD in electrical engineering, which some people know is not the easiest course out there. I had quite a portfolio, and I did go to 2 job interviews, and I was offered a job at the end of the second one at $32,000 a year, which back then was a handsome salary. But the week before, I'd completed a real estate deal that netted me $35,000. And I remember at the time thinking, why would you work for 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year for $32,000 when in 1 week you can make 35 and take the rest of the year off? Anyway, that's one of the things that the rich have in common. But we could slice and dice this in many ways. One of the ways I always like to look at it is, when you travel on airplanes, and I know you travel a lot, Scott, I've had inordinate amounts of time on airplanes. I've had recorded times on airplanes that is longer than the time I've spent in the womb, which is scary. But having said that, I've observed what people are like in economy class and business class and first class, and I would summarize it this way. It's a generalization. I like any generalization, always find exceptions, Scott. But in economy class, people tend to watch movies. And in business class, people tend to read magazines. And in first class, people tend to read books. Not always, not without exception, but that's the pattern. And I often ask myself, is it that people who are predisposed to having the money to flying in first class, that they just tend to read books? Or, it's very interesting, or is it the people who read books end up having the money to be able to afford to fly first class? I don't know the answer to that. Here's a third way of slicing it. And remember, I said we run a whole one-day event on this whole topic. But another way of looking at it is successful people don't do one thing 100% differently. They do 100 things 1% differently. They go the extra mile. As I heard recently, the extra mile is not a crowded road because few people go that extra mile. And so they're all things that when you absorb them, and that's why it's so important to read and get this idea from this book and that idea from that book. We have to go now, folks. You can hear they're coming to get us. But anyway, so it's a sophisticated question and there are many, many answers to it. But listen, real estate singularly is the thing that I found that has set more people free than anything else I've managed to find.
And I think, just in conclusion there, we're not going to leave it here. Every week we'll be bringing out these wealth insights. Just literally sign up to the YouTube channel and you'll get them every week. And I know that we just had a very exciting 5 days. And if you watch the space, we will continue to show you how you can deep dive and get the knowledge between how to invest in real estate, how to invest in residential, how to invest in commercial, and hopefully also get the psychology of wealth that I've learned a huge amount from yourself on. So thanks very much for that quick update. And I think 3 to 5 minutes is not giving you justice for the amount of knowledge you've got. But
I tried to speak fast.
Look forward to sharing it with everyone in the future. So cheers, thanks.
Thank you.